Community, welcome to the last volume of The Haunting of the Caretaker. If you have not heard the other volumes, we invite you to listen to them first. We hope you're in the best environment to listen to the following stories. It's time to enter the following tales of the night. Hello, community. The truth is, I never felt like a babysitter. I didn't work specifically as one, but for a few years, my dad, divorced from my mother since I was a child, paid me to help take care of his new wife's son. His stepson, that is. His new partner is a good person and has always treated me well. And with the boy, honestly, I got along without any problems, despite the age difference. He was 4, and I was 16 when I met him. When it was my turn to take care of him on weekends, sometimes we'd just go out to eat. Sometimes my dad would go out with his wife for a while in the afternoon, and on a few occasions, the least frequent, they'd go out until very late, arriving in the early hours of Sunday, and I'd stay overnight. I knew about several of the boy's night terrors. I knew about his constant nightmares, and that's why I always stayed to sleep in his room, on a small couch where I fit perfectly. The day what I'm about to tell you happened, it was midnight, and I was still on my computer. I was in the dining room getting ahead on some homework and, well, just distracting myself a bit more until sleep overcame me. I went to the bathroom and left the computer. When I returned, my laptop was closed. For a moment, I wondered if my dad had arrived and thought I had forgotten it like that. But in reality, no one had arrived. I went to the boy's room and saw he was sleeping deeply. In the other bedroom, there was no one. I looked out to the patio, and my dad's truck wasn't there. I got a bit nervous, but I opened the computer and continued as if nothing had happened. Then, someone started knocking. 5 knocks, then 5 more. Given the hour, I got very scared and thought of a burglar. I couldn't recognize where the sound was coming from. I sent a message to my dad while looking for the source, and finally, I pinpointed that someone was knocking from the roof. I told my dad, and he told me to go get the boy, to get into his wife's car parked in front of the house, to start it, to drive away from there if necessary before he arrived. He was 15 minutes away. I went for the boy. I took a blanket, wrapped him up and told him to come with me. That there was a gas leak in the house and we needed to check it out. More asleep than awake, he obeyed me, and we left. I told him to take my laptop in his arms as we passed by the dining room counter. I took the keys, and we went out to the sidewalk. We got into the car, and for a moment, I felt safe. But when I looked for my phone to let my dad know, I realized I no longer had it. I opened the computer. It still had a bit of charge, but the Wi-Fi didn't reach there. I thought about taking it out and approaching the patio to try to send a message to my dad's or his wife's Facebook. But the truth is, I thought they wouldn't check it in time. It would be easier to run in for my phone to the bedroom. When I entered the house, I was stunned. A guy came out of the room. It was dark, but I saw him clearly. He was wearing a long, untucked denim shirt. He came out of the boy's room and, without turning to look at me, went into my dad and his wife's bedroom. I ran out and locked myself in the car. I didn't even know where my dad was coming from. I knew he'd be coming worried, calling me, but I no longer had the courage to go back inside. He arrived just 5 minutes later. I told him there was someone in the house, and they went in to check. As you can imagine at this point, there was no one. A patrol car arrived almost 40 minutes later. They checked the house, they checked the patio, the roof, but they didn't find anything strange either. My dad looked scared, trembling, I don't know if from anger or nerves, but his wife seemed strangely calm. The following week, when I arrived on Saturday morning, neither my dad nor the boy was there. They had gone to buy something for breakfast. My dad's wife then took the opportunity to ask me what I had heard, what I had seen. I told her what I heard. I told her how the man I saw was dressed. She showed me something on her cell phone. It was a photo of an old photo, apparently. It was him, right? She asked me. Although not in denim, the man in the photo had a shirt that was also too big for him, untucked. He was apparently at a party next to her, my dad's wife. Yes, I think so, I said. Don't worry. It's the boy's father, she told me. I've heard him. My boy hears him almost every night. He died 3 years ago. And after some time, he started coming to visit him. I didn't know it was him at first, until one day my ex-mother-in-law, his mother, called me. She told me she had dreamed of him in a bedroom taking care of his son. She described the boy's bedroom, even though she didn't know it, and just asked me that if it happened, if I felt him here, not to be afraid, not to try to prevent him from continuing to come see the boy. At that moment, my dad and the boy arrived with breakfast, and we didn't talk about it anymore. I was shocked, but in some strange way, I learned to live with it. Sometimes I would hear knocking on the roof again, especially when the boy and I were alone at night. I stopped going to take care of him when I entered university, but my dad's wife told me on one occasion, recently, that she had stopped hearing him. Maybe, she said, he realized his son was in good hands, with your dad. It's very difficult for me to tell this experience, especially because despite hearing it continuously, I can say that I saw, at least once in my life, a ghost. Why only once? Why that night? Why on no other occasion could I see him? That I don't know. I hope you found my experience interesting. My story is short, but I think it's worth telling. I took care of children for some time. When I was in high school, to be more specific, in San Diego, California. You'd be surprised how well a babysitter can do in the United States. Strange things happen to me, things that are perhaps difficult to explain. You know, as could be normal when you work with children, many times in big and old houses. But there's one experience in particular that caused me indescribable terror, that makes me nervous every time I tell it, no matter how many times I do it, and boy have I told it. Some say they're embarrassed to tell their paranormal stories, but I tell mine with pride in knowing something that others don't. And it's that, poor skeptics, who remain locked in their world full of limits, who close their eyes to much of what happens around them. Among all the children I took care of were those of a Filipino family, and I only did it when their usual babysitter couldn't do it. I think that girl was also Filipino, but I never actually met her. I'm not going to generalize, but with that family, I noticed some racism, and not against me, but against the black families who lived nearby, and on that street. They were the majority. Despite the parents' even strange customs, the children were some of the kindest and noblest people I met while I worked doing that. Perhaps for that reason, I realized that I cared even more about them, that they were okay, that they met a Mexican girl who could love them and teach them a little bit of my culture, of our culture. The boy, about 8 years old at the time, slept in a room downstairs. The two girls, the older one 10, and the youngest 3, did so in a room upstairs, next to their parents. That night the boy called me, scared, just after 9. They hadn't been in their rooms to sleep for long. When I approached to see what was wrong, I was surprised that he was trembling and had difficulty even forming a sentence. Then he just said, "Witch, witch," pointing to the window. I asked him to go to sleep. I closed the curtain and told him I would go out to check. He asked me not to do it, but I explained that it was nothing, and I told him I had to do it. Before going out, he asked me to leave the door to his room slightly open. I did so and smiled. A witch, I was thinking, while taking a golf club from the father, just in case. I went out to the garden, and when I approached his window, as I expected, there was nothing. I gave a check to the back of the garden and everything was normal. However, when I was coming back, I noticed the plants crushed under his window. I gripped the golf club with both hands. I raised my gaze. It was for less than a second, but I can describe to you with certainty what I saw. The figure of a woman seemed to be clinging to the window of the girl's room on the second floor. Without difficulty, as if she were a spider, and in a fraction of a second she walked on all fours towards the roof to disappear from my sight. A voice behind me caught my attention. In the neighboring house, in the window, a very elderly African-American lady was looking attentively at the roof from her house. She asked me not to go out to the yard in a kind but firm tone, as if giving me an order. She didn't even turn to look at me. Her gaze was fixed on the roof. I ran inside and the boy was waiting for me at the door of his room. I told him everything was fine, but to secure his window, just to be sure. I went up to the girls' room who were completely asleep and also secured their window and closed the curtains. I didn't hear another sound, and I tried to explain to the parents that I had seen something strange in the windows. Before I could explain, the gentleman began to say bad words and blame the witch who lived next door to his house. He blamed that lady, my only witness. So my plan to tell them to ask her so they would realize I wasn't lying wasn't going to work. I took care of those children a few more times and never saw anything strange again. Although I must admit that the first thing I did as evening fell was to close all the curtains and secure all the windows. I never thought I would be the one eventually leaving you a comment on one of these episodes with my story, but here I go. This happened just this February, and after what I experienced, I realized how common it is for babysitters to encounter strange experiences. Or maybe they're popular to tell. But I came across your videos, your channel, and I'm sharing mine with you. I came to take care of Alejandra because her parents were acquaintances of a family I had worked with all of last year. They moved and wouldn't need me anymore, but before leaving they recommended me on their social media. For anyone who needs a responsible girl to take care of their children, there's Laura. She has our trust. So, with that recommendation, I arrived at that house. Without a doubt, the most beautiful house I had worked in. Well, the most beautiful house I had ever entered until then. The day I arrived, the girl who helped with the cleaning let me in. She was already expecting me. The family was about to arrive. As I sat down, I heard a few seconds of a beautiful piano melody being played. Then the girl who had received me entered the living room. She smiled at me nervously, perhaps because I had realized she was playing. Maybe they weren't allowed to. I don't know, but she left. She left me alone and I took advantage of those minutes to walk a little on the first floor. The piano was in the middle of the main hall. Beautiful, even for me, who doesn't know much about these instruments. The family arrived and I settled back into the couch where I had been asked to wait. They all came in, and the first thing the mother did was close the piano room It was evidently important. Maybe that's why the cleaning girl was nervous. I started working the following weekend. The family had a trip for a few days and then only the daughter would return. I would have to take care of her Saturday and Sunday. It seemed strange to me, but the pay was great. The girl was very serious, quiet, but very well behaved. She didn't give me a single bad minute. She did what I told her. She finished her homework in the morning and used the rest of the afternoon to read. It seemed extremely strange to me, seeing that in children these days. Besides, she chose things very advanced for her age. At 8 o'clock, before I could tell her, she was already in her room getting ready for bed. I asked if she needed anything and she said, just a little water. But she could go down. I told her it wasn't necessary. She thanked me and put on headphones connected to an old iPod, one of those super small first-generation ones. Even that detail seemed curious to me, and I went down for water. I was lost in fantasies of what it would be like to live in a house like this. To grow up in a house like this, knowing that you might never have to worry about economic problems, ever. As I was serving the water, some piano notes were heard coming from the hall. I was surprised at first, and then got a little angry. And it's that the girl who seemed well behaved had now gone down to the hall without permission, instead of waiting for me to bring up the water. I approached the hall to say something, but it was locked. The lights inside were off. Did I hear wrong, maybe? I thought, and went up to check that Alejandra was in her room. She was still there, and when I approached with the water, she took off her headphones and thanked me. I noticed then that the volume was too loud, and I told her she was going to hurt her ears. "It helps me sleep," she replied without saying anything else as she put them back on. It seemed strange to me, but with all the exact and detailed instructions her parents had left me, they hadn't said anything about not letting her use the headphones. Besides, it was our first day together, so I left her. I lay down in the next room trying to sleep early too. And then again, some piano notes caught my attention. I muted my cell phone. I didn't hear anything else. But then, again those few notes. And then, they stopped again. I left the room and approached the stairs to listen more carefully, but there was nothing anymore. I was afraid to go down to the hall to check, so I went back into the room, determined to go to sleep now, to calm down. After reading, for a while my eyes were closing and the notes were heard again. But now played forcefully, and I startled, waking up immediately from the sleep that had barely lasted a few seconds. I got up not knowing what to do. I left the room and the only reaction I had was to enter Alejandra's room to check that she was there. I opened the door and there she was, with her eyes wide open, looking at me. Alejandra pointed to a drawer in her dresser. I approached and opened it. Among other things, there were some huge headphones. I took them. I turned towards Alejandra, who, without saying anything else, returned her gaze to the ceiling to ignore me. But I understood. I closed the door, went to the other room, and lay down. I put on a music playlist on my cell phone and tried to sleep with the headphones on. I remember very well that being between asleep and awake. When a song ended, and there were a few seconds of silence, I heard a piano song in the background, being played with all clarity in the house. However, I eventually managed to sleep. The following morning I lived with all normality, like the previous one. And in the afternoon, around 4 o'clock, Alejandra's parents arrived. The mom talked privately with her for a while, and then approached me. She thanked me, told me that her daughter had liked me very much, that she could keep coming regularly. I said yes without problem, that Alejandra had also been very nice to me. I didn't comment. Of course, they paid more than double what any other family had paid me before. The lady thanked me. She told me it was difficult for her to find trustworthy girls, especially since Regina left, the girl who had taken care of Anna and Alejandra for a long time. I replied that I would try to earn their trust, that I really needed the job. And then I thought, and I think I said it out loud, "Who is Anna?" "My baby, my girl, my little angel," said the woman. She pointed to a photo that was behind me. In it, a girl of about 12 years old in a dress, like for First Communion or something similar, posed sitting, smiling, looking at the camera, with her hands on the piano. "She went to heaven in November," the woman added. I felt like vomiting, like asking many things, but I couldn't. I apologized and got up to go to the bathroom, and there my legs gave out. I came out and told her I had to leave, that I was already expected at home. I didn't return. I didn't answer their insistent calls for a few days either, until apparently they gave up, until a few days ago. Even today it happens to me. Suddenly I wake up at night in my house, sure of hearing some piano notes. I barely knew her, but I really feel sorry for Alejandra, for having to hear her every night.